Kinnan won the boil. Let me disappear for a second so you can actually read the thing. But what in the world is that? Well, it's a cEDH tournament with 222 players. That's a really big tournament. But also the winner of this tournament is Ian, Comedian, another YouTube content creator. So big congratulations there. But this means deck tech video time. So this is the tournament, link in the description below of the video, and here you can see Ian Flannery with Kinnan, 5 wins, 2 losses and 2 draws. And fun fact, Max Sternberg is also on 2nd place with Kinnan in this tournament. And this is Ian's decklist: Kinnan, Invasion of Ikoria, Tesseract, and a lot of creatures: Sky Turtle, Fawn Mammoth, Tidespire Tyrant, Void of an Over, Wandering Archaic, Seedborn Muse, Yingataxis, Phyrexian, Nyxbloom Ancient, Nessa Hall, Gilded Drake, Consecrated Sphinx, Hullbreaker Horror, Tidespire Tyrant. He is playing obviously the Basalt monolith and also the mentioned Tesseract the Seeker, but also Transmute Artifact and... Wait, he's actually not playing Whir of Invention. But if you've been following me, you might have noticed that I'm usually looking into tournament statistics, and I'm actually gonna leave this entire deck talk stuff about his personal build to Ian, because I have a feeling he's going to make a deck tech video or a tournament breakthrough of this, so I will leave his personal card choices to him. And instead jump over to this picture. So this is Kinnan's total performance in various tournaments. You can see there, total decks 718. That's a really big sample size. And among those decks, those tournament entries, we have a total of 22.91 average win rate, which is very close to 23. To put this into some perspective, because like, how good is that? We have Elever, the Wild Court, on 18.25. We have Aminatu on only 9 decks, so don't take it too seriously, but 10.26. Atraxa 23.29 from 359 tournament entries. Rocco on 24.75. Cece on 27.01. She actually dropped a tiny bit, as you can see, minus 0.19. Tymna and Tana 23.55. And then we have the most popular commander per choice, Tymna and Krom, on an average win rate of 27.44 from 1069 tournament entries. And I actually think it's time to make a video similar to this about these two, just because that sample size is really big. And speaking of sample size, here I would love to give a huge shout out to my friend Cortez, who's been helping me basically collecting data. You see, it's a very big project, collecting data, sorting data, and make sure that you're actually understanding the data. It might look like it's all me, but I have some help here and there. It's like 90% me, and then a little bit help here and there. But I think this gives you a small showcase of how good is Kinnan in a commander leaderboard, so to say. But one thing that is very important to mention here is that when I'm showcasing Kinnan's performance and win rate, people are often commenting that, well, it's very low win rate because bad players, unexperienced players are basically playing it and dragging down the win rate. And there is some truth to that. For example, here you're looking at Ian's. He totally have total decks 718, and Ian has entered into 4 tournaments playing Kinnan. He's entered into other tournaments playing other commanders. You can see the average win rate up there, 22.91, which is the one we were looking at here, 22.91, but then win rate in green, 46.67, which is Ian's average win rate on Kinnan, only looking at his personal performance. Ian isn't actually the only huge star here. We have Jorman Antigua, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who has played 5 tournaments with Kian. He's playing some other commanders too, but he has an average win rate of 48.48. So we also have some good players pushing up the win rate as well. Now we're not gonna showcase people who aren't performing good, because I'm not into that. I will never shame people who aren't doing great in tournaments. I will never shame them on the internet and stuff like that. You will be anonymous, I promise. But what we can do is take a look at various cards that you can play inside Kinnan. For example, Force of Vigor, just throwing out an example here. Now we're looking into how many Kinnan decks are actually playing Force of Vigor, an inclusion rate of 57%, that is 409 decks, they have an average win rate of 24.44. So you can make small deck construction choices that is going to help you win more games, for example. For example, this seems to be a recommended card, while Counterspell, suddenly the win rate is in red, and you see after the 1897 win rate, you see minus 3.94, indicating that choosing Counterspell reduces the win rate. As you can also see here, the inclusion rate is 5.8%, which is very low, but with a huge sample size, that is still 42 decks that have tested Counterspells and not doing so great with it. And we can do this card by card, so I would like to showcase a few that would be theoretically not so recommended. Here we have Dimensional Infiltrator. Freed from the Reel is another way to basically make infinite mana with or not with Kinnan, but with Bloom Tender, basically, but it's not really that good. Or well, it's not terrible, it's 20%, 0.54, so still, but it could be better. The average win rate is still better if you're not including this card in your deck. I'll try to look into some of the more popular ones, the ones that have a very high inclusion rates, like Summoner's Pact. It's very popular, it's being played in 106 decks with an average win rate, I'm gonna say 19% on this one, which is bad still. Machine God Effigy is sitting on an average win rate of 18.81. Sylvan Kari, I can't pronounce that, I'm a little bit sorry, but it's sitting on 19.89 average win rate, and it's being played by 81 decks. So it doesn't look like a recommended choice. Steer away from this one. Priest of Titania, the same, 17.11, so taps for 1 green equal amount of elves, but still, probably not play this one. Fought Vessel, a very sad 12.77 average win rate, so don't play this artifact. Last March of the Ents. Now the sample size on this one is not that huge, only 16, but still, the win rate is 16.67, so not recommended either. Koma, Cosmos Serpent, has almost a 50-50 split, so you have 277 decks that have played this inside their Kinnan builds, an inclusion rate of 38.6, so it's a very high sample size here. But the win rate is still lower compared to the total average, so you have 20.65 if you're including this one basically. Those were some of the negative ones, but let's take a look at some of the positive ones. So we have Wandering Archaic. Now this is positive, but it's like, wow, what a huge change. So you have 0.23 increase from the total average, which is better, but if you're looking right here, the inclusion rate 81.8 is indicating that it's a very popular card. The player experience is also important. Statistics isn't everything. If a lot of people are playing it, including it basically, it's an indicator that it's probably doing good. So a very high inclusion rate will showcase a pretty average win rate, but it's still showcasing a positive win rate. What you want to find are a little bit more of a split 50-50. So Fawn Mammoth has kind of that 50-50 split, 43 inclusion rate, 309 decks have played this. They have received a, I'm gonna say 24 average win rate here. Basically an increase by something of 1%. Trophy Mage seems to be doing good. This is basically tutoring for Basalt Monolith. For those that are new to Kinnan and don't know really what it's about, is that you're tutoring, you basically have a one card combo from Basalt Monolith that will generate infinite colorless mana. And from that infinite colorless mana, you don't have infinite Kinnan activations, so you have ways to basically convert your colorless mana into something. And this is where like Thrasius are usually very popular. And Trophy Mage is basically a tutor, a very budget-friendly tutor for that Basalt Monolith. I guess I should showcase this. Basalt Monolith is basically an 100% inclusion. There are 2 decks that didn't play it, and they just happen to win a little bit more than the average, which doesn't mean that this is a... Like, you're seeing this in red, but you have 2 decks that didn't play it from a 718 decks. So it's still an auto-include, I would say. They just happen to accidentally not play it and accidentally also win. This is a new card that is pushing the win rate up quite a lot, and the inclusion rate is actually quite high, 30%, and you have 214 decks that have played it. It is getting a 25.64 average win rate, a basic increase by 2.73. Normally you're activating Kinnan into this, but if you're not activating it, you can cast it. It usually becomes things like Dockside Extortionist from your opponents, etc. It is basically a secondary version to Phyrexian Metamorph, and as you can see, it has an extremely high inclusion rate. Basically, you're playing both if you're playing one of them. And Flesh Duplicate just happens to be a new card that is potentially helping Kinnan become better. So over time, as people are starting to include better and better in Kinnan cards, Kinnan's average win rate could also go upwards. Nessahal Primal Tide is showcasing some good stuff, 23.68. I really hate this one, Perplexing Chimera. Alright, so it is actually a really good card, kinda, but it's just annoying. It basically has a 50-50 split, that is perfect, that is what we want to see, that is giving us a good evaluation on the card's performance. And you have an increase of 0.5%, so it's a tiny bit better than the average. It's not going to push Kinnan to new edges, it is just going to be a good card inside it. Shared Summons, that is tutoring for 2 different creatures, is also showcasing a good performance. Now, as you can see here, there is a lot of cards we could take a look at if you want to basically have a good picture yourself. You can pause the video here, you can zoom in, and you can look at specific cards here and there you want to get a better picture of. Going over all of them would be a lot. I kind of just want to showcase some of the highlights. Before we continue, there's one more thing I want to really talk about, and that is this one. In my opinion, this is not a card you should be playing inside Kinnan. The reason you're playing it is because after you basically have Basalt Monolith and you have Thrasius, you have infinite card draw, you can draw your entire deck, you cast Thassa's Oracle and you win the match. And apparently 130 decks, basically 18%, have included it. And apparently also won a few games with it. You have a 23% average win rate, which is 0.09 increase to the average win rate. And here I would like to remind everyone that statistics is not everything. If we actually increase the sample size over time, I do think that we're going to see less and less Thassa's Oracle being played and a win rate that is going to go down. Now, I have looked at Thassa's Oracle and Kinnan before, and it has been in red. You see, as you're collecting data over and over, you're updating the data sample that has been very much lower, it's higher now. There have been times where Thassa's Oracle's win rate have been in red, and there have been times when it's in green. So just because something is winning a lot doesn't mean that it's good. And just because something is in red doesn't mean it's terrible either. You see, once again, you have to be a little bit critic about the statistics and what you're seeing. Just because a card is in decks that are winning doesn't mean that that is the card that is actually causing the win. Because once you have infinite card draw and infinite mana, you can do whatever you want. You can win the game with a Walking Ballista. And Walking Ballista is in theory better than a Thassa's Oracle if you're not winning. Because in the end, this is just a dead card inside your 99 if you don't have infinite card draw and infinite mana. Let's actually showcase my point. Let's go back to here, the Boil. Look at Ian's deck again. Among the creatures, we don't see a Thassa's Oracle in here. We see Flesh Duplicate, we see Gilded Drake, but no Thassa's Oracle. Let's look at Max Sternberg's list. As you can see, no Thassa's Oracle either. Wandering Archaic, Void of North, Trophy Mate, Tidespout Tyrant, Thrasius, Fawn, Mammoth, Manglehorn, Nestahal, Nyxbloom. He doesn't play this one, ignore this. Phyrexian Metamorph, Seedborn Muse, Spellskite, Llanowar Elf, Hullbreaker Horror, Glen Alendra, Gilded Drake, Finonels, Flesh Duplicate, Endurance, Armored Scrap... Oh, I'm gonna take a look at Birds of Paradise, Bloom Tender, Colossal Sky Turtle, Consecrated Sphinx, Elvish Mystic, and Elvish Spirit Guide. No Thassa's Oracle. So as you can see, people who are getting into the top spots are still not playing this thing. Let's proceed with the video and let's try and see if we can get a better understanding of the direction, the card choices that Kinnan should make to basically improve the potential win rate. This is where we're looking at a combination of different cards together. So here we have 6 cards, all of these 6 cards: Wandering Archaic, Void of North, Fawn Mammoth, Kinnan, Yingataxis, and Consecrated Sphinx. But then we also have Beast Within and Dimensional Infiltrator. But these 2 are in colorless or black and white. This means that they have been excluded. So what you have here is 49 tournament entries that have played all of these 6 cards, but have also excluded these 2 cards. And suddenly, the win rate is 26.48, and that is showcasing a very good, promising result. Now, I should point out that the result is not statistically significant. We have been doing some t-tests, a p-value, to understand if what we're looking at is trustworthy, so don't take the win rate too serious. But it's still showcasing like a promising results. 49 decks that have entered into tournaments playing these 6 cards but not playing those 2 cards have been doing some good work. And we can tweak around this combination, so look at this. Once again, here we have included Fawn Mammoth and Yingitaxis. Now we are excluding them instead. We're keeping Void of Nowhere, Wandering Archaic, and suddenly we have a higher sample size, 147, who are playing all of these 5 cards, but the win rate dropped. Indicating that the suggestion is basically not to exclude Yingitaxis and Fawn Mammoth. It might be a recommended choice to actually play those things. I also, for fun, took into the example of what if you don't play Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespout Tyrant. And this is basically something people aren't doing. You only have 4 tournament entries where they didn't include Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespout Tyrant, so can't say much, but it doesn't look recommended, so to say. I also did this just for funsies. If you remember, there were 2 decks that didn't play Basalt Monolith. So if you're playing Kinnan and not playing Basalt Monolith, I mean, you only have 2 decks, so it doesn't mean anything. I thought this one was also a bit interesting. So you have 13 decks, which means nothing, they have very few, that receive a win rate of 30.36 by including these 5 cards: Basalt Monolith, Dramatic Reversal, Isochron Scepter. That's another way to generate infinite mana with Kenan basically, and then Whir of Invention, and then excluding Devoted Druid and Ledger Shredder. But this combination of what you're playing here doesn't seem to be that popular. But I think that the takeaway here is this big thing. Lots of creatures, or let's just say lots of big creatures that you're activating into. And going back to Kinan's Ian's decklist, you see those big creatures: Wandering Archaic, Void of Nowhere, Fawn Mammoth, Tidespout Tyrant, Nessa Hall, Colossal. This is actually not something you're activating into, this is something you're cycling from your hand, but if you activate and you find it, why not? 6/5 flying is pretty punchy. Hullbreaker Horror, Yingitaxis, and Glenalendra. And of course, Consecrated Sphinx. This actually takes us to a very good, important subject. If you wanna play turbo, you wanna win as fast as possible, you wanna have fast mana acceleration, and then tutors for your combos. There are so many different decks that are already doing that. Tivit is a good example. Tivit is basically a deck filled with various rituals, tutors for time sieve, and delivers wins very efficiently from that 1-card combo, and utilizes the big commander from the command zone. And if you wanna play that game plan with Kinnan, Kinnan is going to do the same thing but weaker. But once you bring into the element that if you activate Kinnan and you flip into big monster, that's good. That's an optional different game plan to it. You see, we're often talking about the capacity of pivoting. And when you're playing big stompy creatures like this that you could activate into, like for example, you activate and you find a Void of Nowhere, like an early Void of Nowhere from an early Kinnan activation, could be very serious to some decks. You're adding element, you're adding options, you're adding like, okay, my core game plan, plan A, tutor for my Basalt Monolith, doesn't really work, so let's activate Kinnan and hope for success. And that's a good pivoting option that has just been delivered to your commander. And as you can see here, not everyone is doing this. Fawn Mammoth is showcasing a form of promise, but it could be played more, basically. Not everyone is playing this thing. Glenalendra Archmage is a really good creature to flip into with your Kinnan. And as you can see here, it's also not played by every single deck. Yingitaxis Core Augur is showcasing a... wow. Increase of 0.2, but still, it's not played by every deck. It could see some more actions. So maybe the Kinnan win rate isn't only player skill, it might be deck construction decisions, that some people decide to build a different Kinnan deck that isn't really working out. Of course, player skill has a huge impact as well. And if I'm gonna be serious, if you're looking at the win rate difference, the amount some of the cards actually increases on or decreases on, it's not that big. So the card choices isn't hugely important, player skill might be more important, but card choices still have some small impact. But where it starts to have a huge impact is when you're collecting a lot of really good cards together. Like all of these cards, they had like a somewhat positive win rate, kinda. Very small. But when you're playing more of the more of the good cards and less of the bad cards, you're starting to see better values. But like I showcased before in this video, it's a lot of data. So if you want to know specific information around a certain card combination, or a specific individual card as well, leave a comment below. Say, hi Mons, I would love to know the win rate about Terrain Sphere or Sylvan Library. Or maybe you want to know what is the combined win rate of Terrain Sphere and Sylvan Library together, but also if we exclude, let's go, Fawn Mammoth. And I could look into the data and give you the answer, unless like, okay, if I get an answer that is basically very low sample size, I will tell you that we don't have the answer. I should also say that I will do my humanly best to try and answer these questions. I am a human being, so I will do my best. But I hope this video gave you some ideas, some inspiration and some thought process around kinda the direction you could potentially take Kinnan. If you have more specific inquiries, leave a comment below.